All praise is due to Allah. May Allah's peace and blessings be on His last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. We're now going into the last of the topics of tafsir, and this topic addresses the Quran itself in terms of its unique characteristics, the essential miracle of the Quran, and its mode of presentation. The term Quran means reading. It is a verbal noun. It means the same as qira'ah. This is another verbal noun from the same verb qara'a, which means to read or to recite. And this is the name which Allah gave it, because it was a recited text. It was to be read and recited. Allah refers to, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ refers to, single verses of the Quran as being the Quran. Chapters may be also referred to as the Quran, as well as the whole text may be referred to as the Quran. So the term Quran does not in and of itself mean the whole text. It could mean a single verse. If you recited a verse, somebody can say, he recited Quran. Right? I mean, a verse from the Quran. It can be referred to as he recited Quran. If he recited a chapter, you still say he recited Quran. And he recited the whole Quran, he recited Quran. The general principle which the scholars of tafsir follow is that where the words of human beings exceed the words of Allah in a given text, it is no longer referred to as Quran, even if the whole text of the Quran is there. Like the books of tafsir, they do not refer to them as Quran. They contain the Quran or verses of the Quran, etc., but they are not referred to as Quran. As long as the words of human beings exceed the words of Allah from the Quran, that text is no longer classified as Quran. It's a general principle. Now, whether you have an English explanation along with the Arabic text, or you have an Arabic explanation along with the Arabic text, as long as the words of Allah are less, that document, that book is not considered to be Quran. And the other term which they use to refer to the book or the document which is called the Quran is the Mus'haf. When they use the term Mus'haf, it means the Quran as a whole. They will not use the term Mus'haf to refer to a single verse or a chapter. Chapter known as Surah, and the verse known as Ayah. Right? So the Mus'haf is the term which is commonly used to refer to the whole text of the Quran. Now, Allah has referred to the Quran by different names. He has referred to it as the Furqan, as in Surah Al-Furqan he said, "Blessed is he who revealed the Furqan to his slave in order that he may be a warner to all the worlds." And Allah refers to it as dhikr. I mentioned the other verses before. "Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun." Indeed, I have revealed for you the reminder, the dhikr being the reminder and or remembrance, and I will protect it. And I've already clarified in the previous lectures the distinction between the Quran, Hadith Qudsi, and Hadith Nabawi. These are the three sources of revelation: the Quran, Hadith Qudsi. Qudsi here could be translated as holy Hadith. Here we have a place for holy because it was referred to as such. And Hadith Nabawi, Nabawi meaning prophetic, you could call it prophetic hadiths. The Quran, the usual definition which is given of the Quran to distinguish it from the Hadith Qudsi and the Nabawi is that it is the words of Allah. Once you start with that, you've eliminated Hadith Nabawi. You're left with Hadith, the Quran and Hadith Qudsi, revealed in Arabic. Still, Qudsi and Nabawi, as Qudsi and Quran are addressed by that, in a rhythmical form that now eliminates the Qudsi, and you're now dealing with the Quran. To Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, whose recitation is used in acts of worship, that's the Quran alone. And even its smallest chapter is a miracle in and of itself. That is the Quran. So, it's the words of Allah in Arabic, rhythmic form, revealed to Muhammad ﷺ. Its recitation is used in acts of worship, and its smallest chapter is a miracle. 6 basic conditions mentioned in the definition of the Quran. Now, the Quran is revealed, as we mentioned earlier, for reading, contemplation, reflection, and action. This is what it was revealed for, and we spoke about that in terms of the understanding of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and their practice, how they treated the Quran, how Allah warned concerning the Quran that those who don't reflect on its meanings, their hearts are locked up. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا? Will they not reflect on the meanings of the Quran, or are their hearts sealed up? So the idea and the concept of reflection on the meaning of the Quran is fundamental. This is telling us that it is incumbent on every Muslim to learn Arabic. If we are to understand the words of Allah, then we should learn Arabic. We should be involved in the process of learning Arabic. And that's how it was in the early generations when Islam spread from Arabia and it went into Egypt, North Africa, into Spain, Syria, Lebanon, to Sudan. These areas, many of these areas were not Arabic speaking areas. Egyptians were not Arabs. They had their own Coptic language. Sudanese had their own language. North Africans had the Berber language. Syrians, they spoke Aramaic and a variety of other dialects of Hebrew and Greek, and they learned Arabic. Iraq had tribes that were Arab tribes, because really the lines that are now on the map between Arabia and Iraq, of course, didn't exist. There are no lines there. Right? This was a continuous area. So the tribes of the north existed all the way up into Iraq. So there were Arabs there already. But Egypt, Sudan, Morocco, Algeria, all these places, Mauritania, that we know to be Arab states, their native language was not Arabic. But when Arabic came there, when the Muslim took over rule there, and the administration was an Arabic administration, Islamic Arabic administration, and the population in dealing with that administration would learn bits and pieces of Arabic to be able to communicate, and over time they absorbed these words into their language gradually until the Arabic in their language became more than the non-Arabic, and eventually it just became Arabic. So we look at them today and we refer to them as Arabs. Now, of course, there are some who were from Arabia who did settle and marry amongst the people, so there is a strain of Arab ethnic blood, you could say, there. Same thing with Ethiopia, Somalia, and Sudan. But the mass of people who are Arabic speaking, really they were not of Arabic origin. And the earliest Arabs, of course, were from the south, from Yemen. This is really the origin of the Arabic peoples, from the area of Yemen. And as I said, when Islam spread, Arabic spread along with it. And it wasn't really until the time of the Ottomans, after the fall of Baghdad and the hand of the Mongols, and the rise of the Ottoman Empire, where Turkish nationalism raised its ugly head and sought to replace Arabic, the language of the administration throughout the realm became Turkish. So the administrators were known as Pasha and these kind of terms, which are all Turkish terms. Then Arabic started to be taught in Turkey and in other places to be able to enable someone to read the Quran for barakah. The idea, barakah meaning blessing. The idea of reading Quran for barakah began in that time. Prior to that, everybody knew you learn Quran, you learn Arabic to read Quran, to understand it, practice it, etc. But from the time of the Ottoman Turks, with the strength of Turkish nationalism, the concept of reading Quran for the blessing became established and spread. So the hadith in which Prophet ﷺ said, which is found in At-Tirmidhi, authentic, whoever reads a letter from Allah's book will get a good deed recorded for him or her, and each good deed is worth 10 times its value. And I'm not saying that Alif Lam Mim is a letter, but I'm saying that Alif is a letter, Lam is a letter, and Mim is a letter. This was taken literally. You read the Quranic text, you got blessing for it. This tradition has continued with the rise of European colonialism some hundreds of years later, 15th century, 16th century, when they started to dominate the Muslim world, and they stopped the process of transition of Muslim people's languages into Arabic and introduced the Latin script in its place. Then this idea also took root in the other countries. So places like Pakistan and India, the Arabic stopped at a certain stage and remained as what became known as Urdu, which is a mixture of Persian Sanskrit and Arabic, with Arabic playing a major and dominant role. Also Hausa language of West Africa is about 50 to 60% Arabic. The Swahili of East Africa in Kenya and Tanzania is about 60% Arabic. And these were all written in Arabic script. The Urdu continued to be written in Arabic script, but then Swahili and Hausa was transformed into Latin script by British colonizers. And as I said, the concept of reading the Quran for the barakah became firmly rooted. So the tradition in India and Pakistan, where children, as soon as they're able to read, they learn Quran, and as soon as they finish reading through the whole Quran, they have this little ceremony they call Khatm al-Quran. They make a little party for the kid, and they figure, okay, we've done our job. They read the Quran. Of course, this is a bid'ah tradition which they developed, but it's in keeping with that ritualistic tradition which had developed of being able to read the complete text. So though the Quran today can truly be said to be the most widely read book in the world, the most often read book in the world, the reality is that much of that world doesn't understand what it says. Because Arabs only make up about 20% of the Muslim Ummah. This is the sad state of affairs which Muslims find themselves in today. And we need to realize this and to be involved in concerted efforts to educate ourselves and our children and our families to the Arabic language. Not out of a desire to be an Arab, meaning out of a dissatisfaction of one's own background and one wants to change one's nationality, no. But because of the fact that the Quran, the word of Allah, is Arabic. So when we listen to the Quran today, we listen to the recitations of Abdul Basit and Abdul Samad and others, and we are moved. Actually, we're not moved by the Quran. We are moved by the singer. Quran has become, for many of us, music. We are touched by the musical quality of the Qari. And even in these places where people specialize in this, you find, as in Europe, the French and the others, they like to invite cultural acts from different parts of the third world. They will come to Paris and they will perform on stage for the entertainment of the Parisians. Some of these Qaris have gone to Paris and recited for the entertainment of the French and others. And you just have to listen to some of the recitations, where you hear the person reciting and he makes these dramatic, pauses, and you hear people in the background, Allah, 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 Allah. Allah yaftah alayk, this thing. It's just like a pop, the way people respond to the pop singers, That's what it has become, unfortunately. So for us to be able to truly be touched by the Quran, we must learn Arabic. Not just to be able to parrot the letters, but to understand what Allah is saying. The difference that it makes in Salah, to know what you are saying, is something that you cannot grasp until you learn what you're saying. So each Muslim owes it to himself or herself to learn enough Arabic to be able to understand what they're saying in their salah, because the reward for salah depends on the degree of consciousness that we have of that prayer. And to be able to taste the beauty of the Quran as it was revealed, this can only take place in Arabic. Now, when we look at the presentation of the Quran, this is a very important point for da'wah purposes. When we're giving the Quran to non-Muslims, and actually for a number of Muslims maybe who have either converted to Islam or woken up and began reading the Quran, they may find the Quran confusing. You know, I've heard many non-Muslims say that. I read the Quran, but it's confusing. You know, Orientalists, they will commonly say that. It's a confusing book. Because of the fact that the way in which the Quran presents its information, it doesn't seem to follow any kind of pattern. When a person picks up the Quran, having read books and has grown up reading books, where books usually tell you a story, characters are introduced in the first part, then a plot is developed, then a climax is reached, and then some kind of conclusion, you know, the story ends. Now when you pick up the Quran, of course, it doesn't follow that pattern. And this is what causes a lot of people to find it confusing. They're expecting something like that, but it's not. Instead, what you find is the Quran presenting concepts of faith. The believers, the hypocrites, the disbelievers. Then it changes into speaking about paradise and hell. Then it talks about Adam and Eve. Then it goes into laws. Then it shifts into descriptions of creation, the heavens and the earth. Then it goes into talking about the people of old. And then it shifts back into Salah. And the topics are just coming randomly. They seem to be just coming without any discernible pattern. So for a person who is used to reading storybooks or manuals where things are presented in a systematic way, the Quran is found to be somewhat confusing. However, if we consider that the Quran is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking to humankind, Allah is communicating to the reader directly. God is talking. If we consider it from this perspective, and we think, how do we talk? If we sit down and talk for a couple of hours, do we talk like storybooks? Do we talk like manuals? No, we don't. We may start talking about one topic, then something comes to our head, and what about so and so? We start talking about that. For a while, then something else comes up. We start talking about this and that and so on. And actually, if you now put that whole conversation together, it will seem as though you are talking about random topics, very similar to the pattern of the Quran. The fact that you know the person whom you're talking to, and you have certain things in common, this is what links all of that which appeared to be random to somebody who was not there, wasn't present. They just heard your taped conversation. They may not be able to link it all together because they're not familiar with, or they don't have that familiar foundation. So it will appear to them to be random talk also. So when we understand that the subject matter of the Quran is humankind, human beings, This is the subject matter of the Quran. This is what Allah is talking about. Human beings. He's addressing human beings. So everything in the Quran is somehow related to human beings. Whatever Allah is talking about, it comes back to human beings. Either human beings in their relationship with Allah and things connected to it, or human beings in their relationship to other human beings, to themselves, or it's human beings in relationship to the world in which they live, the physical world. One way or another, the subject matter remains essentially human beings. And the main theme of the Quran is the message which all of the prophets were sent with. As Allah said, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا. Allah said, I have sent to every nation a messenger. أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ, commanding the people to worship Allah and to avoid the worship of false gods. That is the essential message. Worshipping Allah alone, avoiding false gods, and submitting to Allah in our personal lives. Submission, Islam. That is the theme which links everything in the whole of the Quran. Now once a person understands that and they go back and read the Quran, then everything now falls into place. That's why it is important, if we do give the Quran to others, that we should make them aware of this difference, that this book you're about to read is a unique book. It's different from any other book that you've ever read. That's where you start from. Don't expect what you normally read. And you should understand it is God talking to you, and He is addressing your relationship, how that relationship should be with Himself, with yourself, with other human beings, and with the world in which you live. Now, the uniqueness of the Quran is not only in its mode of presentation. Its uniqueness lies in its inimitability. That is, it is not possible to imitate its form and style. It is a miracle in and of itself. Now, to understand the miracle of the Quran, one needs to understand, first, Prophet ﷺ had pointed out that all prophets were given something which would cause people to believe in them. Miracles were given to prophets to convince the people to whom they were sent that they were prophets of God. Because why would people submit, follow them? Anybody can pop up and say, I am a prophet. Prove it. That's the purpose of the miracles, to convince the people that they were prophets of God. So as Prophet ﷺ said, all prophets were given something which would cause people to believe in them. The thing which I was given is none other than a revelation, the Quran, which was revealed to me. So I hope that I will have the most followers of them on the day of judgment. Now, miracles, when we look at the miracles of the prophets, the miracle of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was not only the Quran. See, some people mistakenly think that his only miracle was the Quran. No. He had a number of other miracles. When he was in Mecca and the pagans challenged him, he told them to look at the moon. And when they looked at the moon, it split in front of their eyes. One half went down one side of the horizon, the other went to the other. The splitting of the moon. Now the story that you heard, that when Neil Armstrong went to the moon, that they discovered the crack where the moon was cracked in half, that's nonsense. It's not true. Nor did he hear the adhan whilst he was on the moon. This is not true either. Unfortunately, we got all these stories going around amongst us, right? When he went to visiting Cairo, he heard the same thing, and oh, that's what he heard, and he became Muslim. Not true. Neil Armstrong is a non-Muslim senator and remains as such. Okay? The moon split. We don't have to find the crack. It's not a requirement for us. We are informed by the Prophet ﷺ and his companions that this took place. This was among his miracles. Among them, on one occasion, when he was giving da'wah to a man who doubted his prophethood, he told him to look at a tree which was nearby. When he looked at the tree, he called the tree, and the tree came up to them. Okay? This was a miracle. That convinced the man. It was enough. Another occasion, when he was with his companions on the desert for one of the battles, they didn't have any water. They ran out of water. They needed to make wudu and to drink. He told them to bring bowls, and he put his hands in the bowls, and water started to come from between his fingers and fill the bowls. Everybody was able to make wudu. They drank. On another occasion, he and a couple of his companions passed by a woman's house, and she had a goat outside, and he asked her for some milk. And she mentioned to him, or pointed to him, that the goat was dry. Its udders were dry. It had no milk. So the Prophet ﷺ told her, bring the goat. And he rubbed his hands on the udder. It filled up with milk. They filled bowls of milk. They all drank. Gave her back a bowl of milk. And the udders remained full. And the woman said, from that time the goat gave milk until it died. Okay? It was a miracle. And there are others. I'm just mentioning some. Okay? Similarly, for Jesus, miracles were given. For Moses, miracles were given. For all the prophets, miracles were given to convince the people that they were prophets of Allah. And what you find in general is that the miracles that were given tended to be in the area in which the people either excelled, or elements of the society excelled, and it put them in a position of honor or admiration in the society as a whole. So Prophet Moses, for example, in Egypt, the people admired sorcery. The sorcerers were next to the kings. So the miracle which was given to Prophet Musa was something which appeared like magic, turning his staff into a snake. And when Prophet Musa entered into that competition with the magicians, because of course when he first showed the sign to Pharaoh, Pharaoh said, well, that's no big deal. We have many magicians who can do the same thing. So Moses challenged them. Okay, let us have a contest and see who in fact is or has the real power. So of course Pharaoh was sure that his people could outdo Moses, so they made the arrangements. They did. They threw their staves on the ground. When they threw their staves on the ground, it became snakes. It appeared as snakes. Moses became afraid. Prophet Musa became afraid, and Allah had to tell him, La takhaf, don't fear, throw your stick. And of course when he threw his stick, the stick turned into a snake and ate up the others. Now, when Allah refers to the magic of those magicians, He refers to the fact that they mesmerize the eyes of the viewers. Meaning, it appeared in their eyes that these things had become snakes. But they were still ropes and sticks. Whereas the magicians, they knew what they had done. When Prophet Musa's staff became a snake and it ate up theirs, they knew that what he had to be from God. Because what they were doing was just creating illusions, right? You know, the eye can easily be deceived by things, by movements. It's limited, you know. As kids, we used to take a pen or a pencil, you know, and if you take it and you shake it like this, it looks wobbly, like it's rubbery. But no, it's not. It's stiff. Right? That's the illusion, right? Whereas they saw that Prophet Musa's stick became a snake. This is something they couldn't do. They were not changing the nature of things. They were only making things appear that way. So that's why they prostrated to the Lord of Musa immediately. They knew this man was a man of God. And similarly, when we look at Prophet Isa, he was sent to the Jews. And the Jews were noted for what? For medicine. That's their area of specialization. They're into the medical field from ancient times. Medicine is critical. All societies need it. And you go into America, for example, the Jews, 6 or 7 million of them, represent what population of the whole society? America is what, 250 million or something like this? What is 6 million out of 250 million? Who is the financial wizard here? Give us a percentage here. Point what? 0.2%. Or 2% or 0.2%? 2%, okay. Okay, 2%. They're 2% of the population of America. But if you look in the field of medicine, how many medical experts are among them? It's a big percentage. I mean, maybe someplace around 15% or something like that. It's up there. Far greater than their representation in the society. Because this is a critical area. They know to protect their own existence, they will go into these very sensitive areas in the society. So they go into medicine. Because everybody has to come under the knife sometime in their life. Right? So you have a president or whatever that is, you know, against us. Well, wait and see. We're waiting for you. You're going to get sick one of these days, right? So they specialize in this field. And even in the Muslim state, in the Umayyad, Abbasid, etc., the top medical experts were Jews. So even in the time of Prophet Isa, that's how it was. They're into medicine. They would heal broken legs. They would provide medicines to cure eye diseases. So when Prophet Isa was given miracles, it was given in areas similar to what they were into, but greater. He didn't cure or heal broken bones. He made people who were born lame walk. That is something they couldn't do. He didn't heal diseased eyes. He made people who were born blind see. And he didn't save people from death because of disease and, you know, he brought the dead back to life. This is the evidence. And this was the nature of the miracles, to convince the people. Of course, today, if somebody were to ask a Christian, ask a Jew, prove to us that Moses split the Red Sea, or he turned his stick into a snake, or ask a Christian, prove to us that Jesus brought the dead back to life, or he made the blind see, or he asked us as Muslims, because we believe these things, prove it. Prove that Muhammad ﷺ split the moon, or waters came from between his fingers. Can we prove this? Can we prove this? No, we can't prove this. We believe it. We believe it because Allah has said so in the Quran. We believe this book. The Quran is from Allah. Allah said this took place. We believe it. We cannot prove it. There's nothing we can pick up today and say, here is proof that it took place. We can't. I mean, Muslims in their desire to have something, this is where they made up this story about the people when they went on the moon, they found the split in the moon. You know? We're not required to prove this. Those miracles were for the people of their time. That's why we don't have to prove it. It was to convince the people of that time. We don't need the miracle to see the miracle of Jesus to believe he performed the miracle. No. But Muhammad ﷺ, because of the fact that he was not limited to his time, there were miracles which were for the people of his time, but his main miracle had to be not only for those people, but for human beings for all times. So his miracle was the Quran. The Quran, which was in the same language that the people spoke, a language which they loved and adored, a language which they wrote out their poems on gold and hung it on the Kaaba and worshipped it. They loved their prose and their poetry so much. So the Quran came in that language, a challenge to them. And Allah repeats that challenge in the Quran in 4 different places. Allah first said in Surah Al-Isra, which is a Meccan surah, say, even if all of humankind and the jinn gather together to produce something like this Quran, they will not be able to do so in spite of their cooperation with each other. This is the challenge. Then later on, Allah repeated the challenge in Surah Hud, again another Meccan chapter. Hud, the Prophet Hud, is among the stories of the people of old. Or if they say he invented it, say to them, bring 10 invented surahs like it. And you may call on whomsoever besides Allah that you are able to help you, if you are really truthful in what you say. If they do not answer your request for help, then know all of you that it was only revealed by Allah's knowledge. First, bring a Quran like it. Then bring only 10 chapters. If you can't bring the whole Quran, bring 10 chapters. Then Allah reduced it to a single chapter, saying in Surah Yunus, or if they say he has invented it, say to them, bring a single surah like it. And he repeats the same challenge again in Surah Al-Baqarah in Medina, saying, and if you are all in doubt about what we have revealed to our servant, bring a single surah like it. This is the challenge. Now, the Arabs were unable to do this. And we have to understand the nature of challenges. There are challenges which have to be met, and challenges which don't necessarily have to be met. For example, when Elijah Muhammad told his people, white Americans, white people are devils, and I challenge any white American to prove that he or she is not a devil. And of course, years went by and no white American got up to prove that he or she was a devil, wasn't a devil. So he said, see, they're devils. None of them proved that they weren't. Of course, this was a challenge which didn't have to be met. White people were people in power in America. Why do they have to prove? It's not necessary, right? Similarly, Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, they have a holy book called Al-Kitab Al-Aqdas, the holiest of the books, written in ungrammatical Arabic filled with a whole bunch of grammar mistakes. And it states in there, if you don't believe that this is from Allah, then produce one letter, one word like it. Of course, it's nonsense. The words in the book, anybody can write a word like it. This is a challenge which obviously no Muslim needs to stand up to show this, so it stands. But it's a challenge which didn't have to be met. Whereas this challenge from the Quran to the Quraysh, was this challenge of that character, or was this a challenge which needed to be met? If you consider, because for us, one may wonder, why couldn't they produce a chapter like it? And some Orientalists have put this challenge to some Muslims on the internet. People wrote this question to me, asked me, how do you respond? Orientalists have come to some Muslims who are involved in trying to give some dawah here and there, and they said, okay, we're ready to meet the challenge. We'll produce a chapter like it. Who is going to judge whether we did or not? See? This is the challenge. Brothers sent this question to me, said, what do we do? What do we say? What if they produce something like it? What do we... Hey, Allah said that if all of humankind and the jinn got together to do it, they cannot. The smallest chapter in the Quran, Surah Al-Kawthar, Inna a'tainaka al-Kawthar, fasalli li rabbika wanhar, inna shani'aka huwal abtar. 3 lines. We have doubts. Why? Because of course we see Yusuf Ali's translation. It's nice English. He's put it in a nice way. It's more poetic than Marmaduke Pickthall or Noble Quran or whatever. But we know if a Wordsworth or a Shakespeare pops up and says, okay, let me write 3 lines and see if this is not better. These people were not native speakers of English, though they learned a lot of English. No doubt a native poet from English, the English language, could write something more beautiful than the most beautiful translations that we have. I think nobody doubts that. So this is why the challenge is in Arabic. It's not English. It is in Arabic. So now these people are saying, okay, we'll do it. Okay, are you ready? Yeah, we say, yeah, bring it. How are we going to judge? What we say is, the only people who can judge this are the experts. It's not up to you and me, because sure, you can write something and you say, hey, this is just like what you have. And on the surface we might hear it and say, it does sound like what we have. Right? But we are not experts. You understand? Somebody can write a line of poetry and say, this is from Shakespeare. And you've read some Shakespeare, you read this, hey, it sounds like Shakespeare. But now a person who is a Shakespeare expert, he said, nah, he heard 3, I'm going to finish. Nah, that's not Shakespeare at all. He can tell right away. The style. He can find in it the weaknesses in the style and everything. Stuff you didn't. the same thing. So who's going to judge it? It has to be an expert. And we have them. We have the experts. And they will, you bring your poetry, we'll send it to the experts and they will dismantle it for you. You understand? You're not going to be able to do it. Allah said you can't do it and you will not be able to do it. So don't fear that challenge. Don't fear it. If Allah has said it, believe that they cannot do it. Now, back to the issue. Why didn't the early Arabs do it? If you consider that when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ started his da'wah, right? Remember, who are the Quraysh? The Quraysh are living in Mecca. They have, the Kaaba is in their territory. The Kaaba has around it more than 360 idols. Idols from all over Arabia. Because of that, all of the tribes are making pilgrimage to Mecca all the time. They're bringing in goods and there's trading going on, and the Quraysh are right in the center, right? They are the middlemen. They're making it. They're rich. They're living good. Now here comes Muhammad ﷺ and he's saying all of these idols are false. Just one God who's not an idol, finish. Hey, this is serious. This is threatening our old economic existence. We need to stop this very quickly. So they came to him. You know, first they asked Abu Talib, listen, please talk to him. Quieten him. Of course Abu Talib said, hey, you know, I can't stop him. So they came, they got some people together, they came to him and asked him, hey, would you like to be the king of Mecca? This is power. They're checking him out, you know. He says, power? We can make you the king of Mecca if you just give this thing up. No. Is it money? Wealth? We can gather together portions of our wealth and make you the richest man in Mecca. No. What else? Women. Okay, we will get the most beautiful of our women, most beautiful women, and we'll give them to you as your wives. No. What to do? They cannot tempt him. He is calling. It is a disease. It is spreading. So you're trying to torture these people, you know, trying to get them back to stop this thing from spreading and affecting their whole well-being of the whole society. So they decide, listen, we better boycott them. We need to starve them into submission. So when they tried to put the boycott on Prophet ﷺ, of course his whole tribe, Banu Hashim, you know, they're into this thing, you know. You got to stick with the tribe. So they went down with them. They went into the state where they were being boycotted for some 2 years. I mean, they reached the point, as the Sahaba described it, where they were eating leaves and grass. And they said, at night, we used to just reach around. If we felt anything moving, we'd just get in and eat it. In the daytime, of course, you couldn't eat this stuff. You're eating a bug. You know. At night, you don't know what, you can't see it, you can eat it, right? Because they had to eat some protein. This is the state that they had reached. And when it seemed that they had almost starved them into submission, then Prophet Muhammad ﷺ informed Abu Talib that the contract which they had made to boycott the Prophet ﷺ, which had been written and put inside of the Kaaba, which had at the beginning Bismillah and then their contract, that termites had eaten up the whole thing except for the Bismillah. It's inside of the Kaaba with the door closed. Nobody has gone inside. So Abu Talib informs them, and they said, no way, he's talking nonsense. So Abu Talib says, okay, if he is lying, then we will drop our support for him and you can do what you wish. We'll no longer protect him. But if he's telling the truth, he's betting him, right? This was a bet. If he's telling the truth, then you have to stop the boycott. I said, sure, we agree to that. Because they had the key. They knew nobody went inside. How could he possibly know it? And of course, they opened it up, went inside, and sure enough, Bismillah is all that was left. So they were forced to stop the boycott. What to do? The disease is spreading. So they said, okay, next thing, only thing left to do is to kill him. We have to kill him in Mecca here. It's to stop this thing. We need to just kill him. But they couldn't take one, no one from any of the clans could go and do it, because if somebody from one clan killed somebody from another clan, then you had a clan feud which would last for hundreds of years. You know, the feuds. So they said, no, we have to get somebody from all of the clans. We get young men from each of the clans, and they all go and kill him together. So if they all kill him together, Banu Hashim cannot take the rest of us on, all of us. No, they'll have to just go with the flow. And we have ended the job, the problem. So you all know they tried to do it. Prophet ﷺ was instructed by Allah to go to Mecca, Medina, and he left. Ali was left in his place. He got away. But they weren't so satisfied. I mean, one would have thought, okay, he's left Mecca, enough. That's what they wanted to get rid of him. No, they saw him as a disease, a real threat. So they sent scouts out there trying to catch him, even on the way. After he got to Medina, they sent troops fighting, trying to kill him, you know, war. They lost lives. People were taken into as prisoners. They had to pay ransoms. How many things happened? Eventually they had to make a truce. And they broke the truce, and the Prophet ﷺ came with some 20,000 followers, and they just had to submit. Now, think about that. If all they had to do was to produce 3 lines of poetry like Al-Kawthar, and that would have ended the whole thing, does it make sense logically that they would go and do all of this other stuff and not do that? Because the Quran is saying, if you don't believe this from Allah, do it. Surely they are the masters of the language. Why didn't they do it? This was a challenge which they needed to meet. Why didn't they do it? Because they couldn't. We can understand that much of the miracle because we don't know Arabic. We're not able to appreciate the real beauty and the miraculous quality of the literary miracle of the Quran. But we can understand it, at least in this historical context, that it must be a miracle if they couldn't do it. The expanding universe, or the movement of the sun, or the cycle of water and springs, and there are so many things that are addressed in the Quran that is a lecture in and of itself. I'll just mention one which I think many people are not aware of. Most of these other ones I mentioned, you know. But there's one which I came to learn maybe about a year or a year and a half ago. I was talking with one professor of geology, and he was explaining this particular miracle to me, which I thought was quite interesting. And it concerns Surah Al-Hadid. Surah Al-Hadid, the chapter of iron. Al-Hadid means iron. And Allah describes iron saying, وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدِ فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. I have sent down iron, which has great power and a lot of benefit to humankind. He went and he analyzed this statement of the Prophet, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what human beings knew about iron. And it had always remained something of a puzzle that Allah used the term sent down iron, to send it down to the earth, because people discover iron in the earth. We dig up the earth and we find it. We bring it up. It's not coming down. And until very recently, this remained something inexplicable. However, in modern times, when they have now worked out, theoretically, how the earth was formed and the approximate temperatures of the earth in its formation, they came to realize that the heat which was generated in the formation of the earth was not sufficient to produce iron. This is a scientific fact. Iron was not produced in the formation of the earth, though it forms a good portion of the core of the earth, the molten core, which gives it its magnetic field around the earth, and a large portion of the crust. And iron is inside of virtually everything. Hemoglobin, it's in chlorophyll. It is critical for the transfer of oxygen in our systems, and it's all over the place. Iron. But it was not formed on the earth. So they, in their researches, came to find out that much of the meteorites coming from out of space high in iron, that the iron came from out of space into the earth. And in the early stages, when the earth was being formed, where the crust was not solid, then it used to go right down to the core. So that's why it concentrated in the highest percentages in the core, then in the crust, etc., and then it ended up playing this massive role. So I said, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Anyway, the point is that the Quran is a unique book. It is Allah's final communication to humankind. It remains the miracle which anyone who wants to get evidence that Muhammad ﷺ was a prophet of Allah, it is there with the Quran. That miracle will remain until the last day. It had to, because for anybody to believe, we cannot require them to believe about something which is no longer present. It has to be something tangible. So Allah left the Quran as the major miracle of Prophet ﷺ to convince the people of his time as well as the people until the last day on this earth. And as I said before, it is unique in its style and presentation. It is a discourse. And when we read the Quran, we should keep in mind its subject matter, as I said, and its theme. Before going into these questions, I'd just like to mention that the issue of Salah, there's something of a bit of confusion. Our brother who was organizing this thing, people who were sort of on him, that the sisters should be praying in this other room and, let the brothers pray in here. But actually, this is not from the Sunnah. Sheikh bin Baz, Sheikh Nasruddin al-Albani, they both opposed the idea that women in a masjid should be locked off in a room where they cannot see the imam, they cannot see those who are praying ahead of them. Why? Because this was not the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. It was not the Sunnah. Furthermore, it creates problems, as what happened here. The brother's mic came off, sisters couldn't hear what he was doing. Confusion. This is clear evidence. And this is what happens in masjids where they do this, and the imam does sijda to tilawa. He's going to make sujood for reciting a particular verse from the Quran. He goes into sujood. The women in their section think he's gone into ruku'. He comes out. They're going into qiyam. The salah is a mess. This was not the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I know some people say, well, you know, they were the Sahaba. Yeah. Today, Muslims are problematic, you know. You can't trust these men. The point is, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is a verse in the Quran which was revealed about a Sahabi who during the prayer, he used to stay at the back line, and when he went into ruku', he used to look under his armpit at the women. This was a Sahabi, and the verse from the Quran was revealed about him. So, what does that mean? They were angels? So we have one rule for them and we have another rule for us because we were all devils and they were angels at that time? No. They were human beings. So, of course, in a situation where the space is tight, you know, it's better to put a kind of a divider to at least separate where the women are praying from the men, some kind of separation. But it doesn't need to be a lock-off room, lockdown situation. You know, this has become common in many parts of the Muslim world, but it's really not in keeping with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the best of generations. It was not their way. This in fact is bid'ah. And Sheikh Nasruddin al-Albani has said so in no uncertain terms. So has Sheikh bin Baz. It is bid'ah. Well, the situation of the travelers being able to make the two prayers together is something which is from the Sunnah. If the place is big enough where those who are residents can pray to a section where they can leave or they can continue, and the others who are praying, travelers, can pray together, then it's better to do that. You know, perhaps to organize it, try to organize in such a way that those who are residents maybe stay over to the right hand side, so those, but still people are coming whilst we're praying, they're coming later, so that problem is not going to go away. But the point is that we try to do it to the best of our ability, the best ability we're able to. We try to do it, and it is okay once those people finish their prayer, they leave, you just fill up the gaps and you carry on. And the other point which had come up, I should just mention, the idea that if one prays Dhuhr with an imam, for example, who is a resident, so he has prayed 4 rak'ah, and of course you as a traveler praying behind an imam who's a resident, you have to pray 4 along with him. You cannot stop at 2. You must pray 4. So once you have finished your 4, you can then, along with the other people who are travelers, stand up, make iqamah, and do your 2. Some people question that, saying, where is the evidence? Where is the proof that the Prophet ﷺ did this? Well, the point is, the proof is that the Prophet ﷺ combined and shortened. We know that is a fact. We also know that he said, if you're praying behind an imam who's praying 4, then you have to pray 4. So, in doing that, prayed the 4, combined the 2, we have done what the Prophet ﷺ said. For one to say, bring me evidence that the Prophet ﷺ did that, I will have to say it is impossible, because he was always the imam. So it's not possible. That circumstance is not going to arise because he was always the imam. You need to bring the evidence that it is not permissible. We are hearing that Imams are Sufis. Do you know if this is true? Imam Siraj, Imam Quick, that's Abdullah Hakim Quick, and Zaid Shakir. Well, I don't know. I don't know of Siraj Wahaj as being a Sufi. I know he may have some misunderstandings about some issues of Aqidah or something like this, possibly. But Sufi, I don't know this. I've never heard this before. Abdullah Hakim Quick, I know absolutely that he isn't. He has given lectures against Sufism. There's no way. He's not a Sufi. He was my classmate. We studied together, graduated from Medina. In fact, he gave me Shahada. So I know he's not a Sufi. As to Zaid Shakir, I don't know. I know when he left America and went to study in Syria under one of the top Sufis there, when he left America, he wasn't a Sufi. But what he came back as, I don't know. Is it permissible when reading the Quran to join the ayahs when reciting it to beautify one's qira'ah? No, joining ayahs for beautification, it's joining ayahs because you can join ayahs. You can read continuously or you can pause. Of course, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was to pause at the end of each verse. That was his sunnah. But it's also permissible to link them and continue reading. So the issue of doing so to beautify the voice, let's leave out to beautify the voice. If we're going to manipulate the Quran for beautification, it's not a good idea in general. But that one may recite in different ways, sometimes separate or combining verses, this is perfectly permissible. Well, our brother's question that it is not permissible to beautify one's voice when calling the adhan, but it is okay for recitation of Quran. Truly, there is a statement of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said that whoever does not sing the Quran, man lam yataghanna bil Quran falaysa minna, whoever does not sing the Quran is not of us. Right? So the idea of beautifying one's voice when reciting the Quran, we know this is from the Sunnah. It's strongly recommended that we don't read Quran like we read a book. You should beautify it with our voices. But the adhan, what is most important, that it's loud and clear, that it is melodious, there is no harm. There's nothing against it being melodious. But when one starts to stretch things out to extremes, see, then we're entering into another realm. Right? We don't stretch things out to the point where we're mispronouncing these words in Arabic. This is where it is no longer acceptable. It becomes distortion of the adhan. No, the Sahaba did. Sahaba did. It was his common practice to stop. This was how he normally recited. It was common practice to stop. But we know that the joining of verses, they did do. That's why you have, for example, two forms of Surah Al-Qari'ah. You can find in some Qurans, those that are printed in India and Pakistan, Al-Qari'ah is presented as one verse, Mal-Qari'ah as the second verse. Whereas in those printed from Egypt and Syria, etc., Al-Qari'ah, Mal-Qari'ah is one verse. And there are many other examples in the Quran. And that's why you can't fix the exact number of verses there are in the Quran. Because It is only in Surah Al-Fatiha that we know it has exactly 7 verses. All of the others, though we're looking and we talked about 3 verses in Al-Kawthar, etc., we cannot say it with certainty. We cannot say it with certainty. Meaning that you could join the first and the second, or join the second and the third, because the numbers were not fixed except in Surah Al-Fatiha. Right? So the total number of verses in the Quran, we don't know. Where there is, sisters asking about the principle of mad, which is elongation of vowels. If one applies this in the adhan, it has to be applied. You cannot say Allahu Akbar. You can't. There is an alif there, so you must say Allahu Akbar. But now, what we're talking about is not Allahu Akbar, and if you say it very slowly, you're saying Allahu Akbar. So everything has been slowed down and everything has been lengthened proportionately. There's a difference between that and saying Allahu Akbar. No, you see, it's out of proportion now. It's been twisted. There's no justification for that kind of mad beyond, those people who specialize now and turn that into a whole sing-song, right? Okay, in the case where you had started the prayer behind us and it broke, you could no longer follow the prayer anymore. If you had completed 2 rak'ah, for example, or you were doing 2, say you completed 1, then it would have been enough for you to have just kept your line, one sister in the middle, continue to lead the rest and complete the salah. Huh? Okay, it's too chaotic for that. Then you could have just somebody has to say something. Somebody has to say something, right? Pardon? Break off and do your own salah? This was not the best. The best thing is to pray in jama'ah. To do it in jama'ah. You all were there as a jama'ah. You should know as women that your prayer in jama'ah is better than your prayer by yourself. So there, one of the sisters should have just led you in salah. Whether you went and did the 2 over again, do the 2 complete, or you just did what was remaining and completed it. That would have been better. But if you didn't and you ended up praying separately and just doing it, then Mashallah, you did what you were able. Yeah, that sister who was in, what it would need, the sister who was in the middle of the front line or close to it, she should have just said Allahu Akbar and sat up. Everybody then would just start to follow her and complete the rest of the prayer. Just as if men are praying and the Imam breaks wudu. Huh? Pardon? Or died, yeah, we don't have to go all the way there, but he breaks wudu, he breaks wudu and he has to leave. He gets up and he leaves, Somebody has to take over. Now there are narrations, there's athar of the Sahabiyat, Aisha and Salama, that they stood in the middle of the line. Yeah. Well, that was their sunnah. Of course, there's nothing which says that among the women, that woman who's leading the salah could stand in front. There's nothing which said she couldn't. But if the narrations describing what the wives of the Prophet ﷺ did, that's the one we follow. That is the way of the Salaf. If we just address that in the case of the Quran, right? One of the ways that Dr. York liked to create confusion amongst people, right? Dr. York, who was the founder of the Ansarullah community in New York and other parts of the States. That was popular for a period of time, and Muslims were deluded into thinking that they were actually Muslims, and they sat on the council, of masjids in New York and so and so. And I wrote a book on them called The Ansar Cult in America, exposing them to be not from Islam at all. But in fact, they were enemies of Islam. I exposed their beliefs, taking it right out of their books and comparing what Islam says, what they said, and that basically, alhamdulillah, blew them out of the water. After that, they fell apart. Not before admitting, Dr. York said that they really weren't Muslims anyway, they were really Jews, and then he changed his name to Rabbi Rubin, and he went into the Jewish thing, right? Anyway, the point is that why was I telling you that? Oh yeah, one of the ways that he would like to create confusion amongst the Sunni Muslims to draw them into his net is he would take the translation of Yusuf Ali, he would take Fatiha, then he would take Pixel, and he would take about 5, 6, 7, 8 different translations, and he would show them one after the other. Look at this. These people don't know Arabic, and they're this, that, and the other. So then he started his own mistranslation of the Quran, right? So he created his own. So he locked his followers into following him by claiming that the others were mistranslating the Quran, and that's why there are all these differences among them. The reality is that, of course, when you're translating, as I said, translation of the Quran cannot be done. We cannot translate the Quran. All we can do is write in English some of the meanings of the Arabic. So in fact, what we call translation is just a tafsir in English of some of the meanings. That's all it is. Similarly, if you're going to translate a hadith, that's what you're going to do. You'll make a sharh. Instead of tafsir, the Arabic term they use for explanation is sharh. You do a kind of a sharh in English. Because if you translate hadiths word for word, you can create all kinds of confusion. And that's exactly what Dr. York did. He gave you the word for word meaning, and then he started sticking it together this way and that way, and he came up with a whole nother story altogether. So in translation, one has to look at the commentaries of the scholars on the hadith to understand, similarly to understand the Quran. So what you're going to put in English will be the closest that you can come to explain the meaning of the Arabic. That's the bottom line. Do you recommend we teach our children to memorize Quran even though they don't understand what they are reading? Yes. How would you recommend we teach those who are learning Arabic but English is their primary language? Well, there are books, there are teachers, there are classes. We need to put the children in classes with where people are teaching them to understand Arabic, to communicate in Arabic. And this needs to be done with Arabs. A method of da'wah now becoming popular is to visit Muslim homes, leaving homes for 3 days, 40 days, 4 months, and so on. For this purpose, what is your position on this method and your advice to Muslims on this subject? Well, the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was not to send out ignorant Muslims to spend time sleeping in mosques across Arabia. This was not his sunnah. Nor was it the sunnah of the Sahaba to do that for 3 days, 40 days, 4 months, or any of these numbers. It was not from the Sunnah. This was not the way of the Salaf, the righteous early generation. It's not their way. Their way was to send out knowledgeable individuals from the community to other communities that needed knowledge. And they would stay there and teach the people. When they had finished teaching people who would continue, they may return or they may stay there and live there. That was the way of the early generation. It's not to say that on a spontaneous basis, if we got together and said, hey, let's go visit the masjid in so and so and meet the brothers, and share, socialize, and we went to some other communities and visited, it's not any harm. There's no harm in doing that. But in setting it up as the way to call people to Islam, calling it fi sabilillah, changing the meanings of the Quran, when the Sahaba, they all understood fi sabilillah means jihad, out there on the battlefield. That's fi sabilillah. Calling going out for 3 days fi sabilillah is a joke. It is ludicrous. It is making fun. It is demeaning jihad to do it. And I remember myself, because when I first came into Islam, and I looked around trying to find where is some knowledge. I wanted to learn the deen. Met brothers from the Jama'ah, and they told me, well, we're going to England, and in England, in every masjid there is a Maulana. You can go there and learn. So I said, okay, let me go. Let me go sit with those people of knowledge. Now, the point is, I went, I tried to seek knowledge. I realized after I had gained what I could, and I learned something. I learned tajweed of the Quran and a few things. And when I was about to come back, and I remember originally I was encouraged, I was to go for 7 days. I agreed to go for 1 week. And I was sort of goaded into staying for 3 months, right? Almost destroyed my marriage, because I'd only been married for about a week. And there's a way they have of, at the end of their talks, they say, look at this brother, how he sacrificed. He only just got married a week ago, and he's here out on the... And they kind of put that thing on you. And hey, I was out for 3 months. My wife was finally told me, hey, listen, if you're not making it back, maybe you're not going to find me here when you come back. So, okay, I said, time to get back. Right? So the point is that on my way back, when we stopped in London, because I used to like to read a lot, so I went to a bookstore and I bought these books. There was books on different aspects of Islam, etc. I bought stacks of books. And I came back into the main masjid where we were staying with these stacks of books. And the secretary of the main man, he told me, hey, what are you doing with all these books? I said, "It's books, Islamic books." I said, where'd you get these things from? Said, this bookstore. This is Jamaati Islamic bookstore. You don't know what the intention of these people are. Don't read these books. You just keep reading Tablighi Nisab. I had read the thing 3 times already. I've been through the whole thing 3 times. And I said, hey, there's a problem here. Because this idea of wanting to just limit your whole knowledge base to this one book, I felt something wasn't quite right. And when I expressed to them, hey, I think I want to go to Mecca or Medina and go study Arabic, they said, oh, better you go to Pakistan. Spend 4 months in Pakistan. You fly right over Mecca and Medina, go to Pakistan. In fact, better you go to India, to Nizamabad there in India, right? Where Hazrat Ji's base was, right? And I said, but this is the Arabic I want to get. They said, well, listen, the light of Islam that was in Mecca and Medina, it is no longer there. It is now in Nizamabad, where Hazrat Ji is. Mashallah. Then I was told that, I said, but what's Arabic? I want to get. I said, well, listen, if you go on the Jamaat, with the Arabic Jamaat, you see, there is a brother who didn't know any Arabic. And he went with the Jamaat, Arabic Jamaat, all over India. And he just used to sit there. And then one day, he understood everything. Of course, I said, well, I don't know if I can really depend on that one, right? And then, I was told, because when they had the big ijtima in Dewsbury, people had said, we were a group from America, we were there, and I said, there's a spiritual bath going on. I said, spiritual bath? I said, yeah, what was that? I said, come, they're doing the spiritual bath. It was bayat in Urdu, which was bay'ah in Arabic. It ended up being bait, and from bait it got corrupt to bath, and we understand some kind of spiritual bath was going on. So we went to the house where Hazrat Ji was, Sheikh Hazrat Ji, and they had these towels tied together, and we all held on to the towel. He said something in Urdu, and then after that he said, that was a spiritual bath. I said, yeah. So when I was leaving, I asked the secretary, I said, what does the spiritual bath mean anyway? Right? He said, what it means is that when you go back to Canada and you have to do anything important in your life, you must write to Hazrat Ji. I will translate your letter into Hindi or Urdu and tell Hazrat Ji. He will give advice and I'll write and send it back to you. Now, I knew that this process is going to take at least 10 days for a letter to go from Canada, to Nizamabad, right? Or Nizamuddin, I don't know what this place is called. Nizamuddin, right? Nizamuddin. And maybe it'd take another 10 days for him to get around to translating it and talking to Hazrat Ji. And then another 10 days to come back. So I have a major decision to make in my life. I have to wait 1 month to find out what to do. I said, hey, something wrong here, and really there was something wrong, So the point is that after I came back and I announced to my wife that we are now Hanafis, right? because they explained that there's these 4 madhabs, you got to follow one, doesn't matter which one you follow, but Imam Abu Hanifa was Imam-e Azam, the greatest Imam. And most Muslims in the world are Hanafis. But you can follow anyone. Of course, I became Hanafi. Right? I learned the prayer of women to teach my wife, because there's a set of acrobatics they teach women, Hanafi women, to make their prayer is a very acrobatic affair. Right? It's not regular prayer, right? So I learned this acrobatic thing and I went back and taught it to my wife. This is how we have to pray. You have to pray from now on, right? And then, alhamdulillah, we moved home and we're living right next to this masjid. And the imam of the masjid, he was from Egypt. And I started studying Arabic with him and learning fiqh. And of course he was from the Shafi'i madhab. And after I was a Hanafi, I had already decided I was a Hanafi. I had learned all the Hanafi fiqh I could from the Maulanas there in England. And he is now telling me it's this, it's that, and here's the proof for it. Because of course when I was getting the Hanafi thing, there were no proofs. It's just this is what you do, that's what you do, that's what you do. Well, now he was saying it's not that. It's really this, 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 and this. And here's the proof. Prophet ﷺ said, the verse so-and-so. See, we have a problem here. I need to get to the source, So I decided to go to Medina. Alhamdulillah, this is within 1 year after I accepted Islam. There had some scholarships showed up at that time, and Abdullah and myself, we went to Medina. Abdullah came. Now we went into Medina, and the situation in Medina was rough. This is 1974. I mean, seriously rough. I mean, I've been with the Jamaat in England, and it can get pretty rough there too, right? You know, these bathrooms and, you know, stuff we weren't used to. But Medina was really rough. And, you know, we were living in these houses which were made, I think, from the turn of the century, from, you know, date palm tree trunks and dirt and, you know, volcanic rock built by the Turks, you know, over 300 years ago. Really primitive stuff. No air conditioning, you know, and it gets seriously hot there. I got stung by a scorpion twice, right? Yeah. First time I didn't even know how serious it was. Actually, I was sleeping, the thing stuck me while I was sleeping. I got up, I saw it and killed it with my slipper and went back to sleep, tried to go back to sleep, and I started to think, well, I wonder if this thing is dangerous. I said, maybe I better go to the hospital and just check this thing out. I went in there, told them, hey, bring him over here and, you know, give him a shot, and, you know, I didn't realize this thing was so serious, you know. And after I got the shot and everything, and the effects of the poison and the shot or whatever, I thought I was dying. I felt like I was dying. I told my wife, please, just read Quran for me here, you know, just sit here and read Quran. I think if I close my eyes, I'm not coming back, right? So, anyway, after all of this, I met some brothers from the Jamaat. They came to Medina. So they said to me, brother, have you been out fi sabilillah? I said, hey, if I'm not fi sabilillah here, man, you know, there is no fi sabilillah. You understand? But see, they were so locked into this idea that the only way I could be fi sabilillah is if in Medina there I went out for 3 days. You know, in spite of all that I had gone through there and everything, I wasn't fi sabilillah until I went out for 3 days. You know? This is a distorted idea of, you know, what constitutes, you know, da'wah and the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. You know? Now, the reality of the Hanafi madhab, you know, the majority of what is practiced in the Hanafi madhab cannot be attributed to Abu Hanifa. This is the reality. Really, this is the case most so in the Hanafi madhab. You know, so the fact that we find these differences, etc., some of these things have come in from areas which are under cultural influence, or the scholars of that area have adopted certain practices and taken certain decisions, and it's become a standard in the later generations of scholars from that madhab, and not to be found in the early generations. Because you will find Hanafi scholars of the early generations who raised their hand with each takbir, and they were Hanafi scholars. Okay, what happens when sisters are praying with the imam from separate rooms and the imam says, oh, I think we did this already, stays in sajda? There is a brother and his wife who are both from India. They both claim to be Sayyid, blood descendants of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Can you comment on this? I would say, if you claim to be a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ, first, prove it. You trace your ancestry right back to the Prophet ﷺ. You know, most of these people who say this, they can't. It's just been said, and people have just gone along with it. You cannot trace it back. And secondly, so what? You know, Abu Lahab was from the family of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and Allah said he's in hell. So what? You know, but, you know, unfortunately, they have turned it into, as I said, a kind of a caste thing. You know, coming out of the caste system of Hinduism with the Brahmins and the Shudras, you know, they felt there should be some distinction here. You know, so they became Sayyids. A sister is asking about the verse Allahu alladhi khalaqa sab'a samawatin wa min al-ardi mithluhunna, that Allah has created 7 heavens and from the earth a similar number. That there are hadiths which speaks about the 7 heavens and the 7 earths. What are the 7 earths? Allah knows best. If you have prayed your fard prayer and wish to pray it with more concentration, can you do it again? No. Prophet ﷺ forbade the repetition of a fard prayer. It's not permissible. You pray it, it's done. You can make sunnah prayers you want to do to try to make up for some weaknesses of your compulsory prayer, but you cannot repeat the compulsory prayer. At one place in the Quran, Allah says that a day with Allah equals 1,000 years on earth, and another place He says that it's 50,000 years. 50,000 years from what you calculate. These 2 calculations, scholars of tafsir have pointed out, refer to different occasions. One, the day of Qiyamah, that day would be 50,000 years or whatever, and the day in which the angels go up to Allah, their journey is the journey of a day, and that's like 1,000 years as would pass on earth. Okay, so the numbers are referring to 2 different occasions. I don't need to get into the speed of light because there's nothing there that says speed of light. It says that the angels go up to Allah in a day which is like 1,000 years from which you count. It says it. That is the time that passes. That's how long the day is relative to us on earth and the angels. Now what speed that the angels go at, Allah knows. I heard it was impermissible to name your children after chapters in the Quran, or things like Mina or Arafah, or even names that praise themselves like Iman or purity. What do you know about this? Well, there are some names that the Prophet ﷺ, he forbade, names which indicate a sense of self-righteousness. Names like Khairun Nisa or Fakhruddin. These kind of names were, it's really not liked in Islam. I mean, it's proud. Fakhruddin, is pride of the religion. Alhamdulillah. So it's better to take names of the companions and others. He recommended, there's a hadith where he recommended that we not take, I don't remember exactly which name it was, I don't know whether it was taqwa or some name of that nature, but it would be like Iman, because he said, so that somebody will not ask, is Iman at your house? And you say no. You don't want to enter into a situation where you're denying something. Iman is, you're basically saying there's no faith in my house. Is righteousness in your house? No. So you don't want names which will have those kind of implications where you may make those kind of answers. And names of angels, no harm. Do women have to recite out loud during the Maghrib or Isha, or do they recite quietly like Dhuhr and Asr? I've seen this being done. What is correct? Well, they recite loud enough that they can hear themselves. If they're making a jama'ah by themselves, it should be enough that the women that are praying together can be heard. If a woman is praying by herself, she reads aloud enough that she can be heard. I mean, to say not, that's what the Prophet ﷺ did, and he said, pray as you saw me pray, to both men and women. So that is the basic practice. To say otherwise, one must bring evidence. Do women have to cover their hair or cover themselves when reading Quran? No. There is nothing in the Sunnah to indicate this. It's a cultural thing in some parts of the world. Also, it's a cultural thing in some parts of the world that when people bathe, they don't take off all their clothes. They wear some little garments and bathe in these garments because they are under the impression that it's not permissible for you to take off all your clothes. But this is not from the Sunnah. Where I came from in colleges, there are Muslim society centers where students could do da'wah, perform salah besides my college. What would be your concern to convince them to make one? I guess the person is asking how would we combine the various groups that are active on campuses or whatever, and the foundation on which we unite is on knowledge, on correct knowledge of Islam, the Quran and the Sunnah as it was understood by that early generation. Anyway, does one have to make Salatul Witr daily? No. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on the last messenger of Allah. Okay, we have completed in the previous lecture our section on tafsir, and we're now going into the material which constitutes the foundation or foundational information about the science of hadith. Now, hadith in Arabic, as a noun, it means conversation or saying. As an adjective in Arabic, it means something new. When it's used in this context, the science of hadith, or the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what it refers to are the sayings, the actions and approvals and information about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mannerisms, physical descriptions, all of that, which was conveyed by his companions to subsequent generations, and which became recorded in books which we know as books of hadith. With regards to the Sunnah, because there's another term which is used and we need to understand what is the distinction between the two. The Sunnah refers to the way of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, his way, and it includes all of the things which I described previously, which are included in hadith: his sayings, actions, approvals, descriptions of his demeanor, his physical descriptions. All of that is included in Sunnah, his way. So then, what is the distinction? What's the difference between the Sunnah and hadith? And I should also mention that we'll look at in fiqh another meaning of Sunnah, which means recommended things. That's how it's commonly used, as recommended things. But I'm just using it in the sense that it is related to the science of hadith here now. What is the distinction between the Sunnah and hadith? Well, hadith represents the vehicle or the container is within which the sunnah was communicated. This is the difference between the two. When you talk about sunnah, you're not talking about the companions narrating and their students narrating and recording in books and things like that. You're not talking about that methodology, the system. What you're just talking about is the content. So the way of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that was conveyed in the structure or the container which we refer to as hadith. Now the sunnah, when we speak about the sunnah, I should just mention briefly that the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ can be divided into two basic types. One which we call sunnah tabi'iyya or natural sunnah, and the other which we call sunnah tashri'iyya or legal sunnah. This is an important distinction, and I spoke about it briefly before. The natural sunnah are things which the Prophet ﷺ did as an Arab, a human being, an Arab in the 7th century, which had no legal import. They were just his personal likes and dislikes and characteristics. How long he kept his hair, how he used to walk, the type of garments he used to wear, these kind of things. How he used to sleep, and all these things, we look at this as being a part of what is called the natural sunnah. And we talked about his slippers before, right? The sandals that he used to wear. He liked a particular style of sandal, and we are not obliged to go and wear sandals like he wore. Now, there was among his companions one, Abdullah ibn Umar, who used to do everything that the Prophet ﷺ did. He wore a ring on his left hand, Ibn Umar put one on his left hand. He used to walk this particular way, Ibn Umar used to walk the same way. He used to wear his garment in this way, Ibn Umar used to wear the garment in the same way. Whenever he changed, Ibn Umar changed. He imitated everything that the Prophet ﷺ did. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't stop him. He didn't say, don't do this. However, Abu Bakr didn't do it, Omar didn't do it, Uthman didn't do it, Ali didn't do it, and these are the Khulafa Rashidin. The 10 people who were promised paradise, none of them did it. So hey, we know that this was just an individual thing which Ibn Umar liked to do, and if you choose to do it, no harm. But it's not required, nor is it called for. Right? And to promote it as the deen is wrong. To promote it as the religion is wrong. Now, in the case of sandals, there is a legal sunnah regarding it. The type of sandals you wear is up to you. There is nothing legally involved in the style or whatever, except we can say that for men to wear women's sandals is haram. For women to wear men's sandals is haram. A woman came into the house of Aisha wearing her husband's sandals, and Aisha stopped her and said, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ cursed mannish women. So there is a legal part. Prophet ﷺ said that Allah's curse is on the man who dresses like a woman and the woman who dresses like a man. So there is a legal aspect in sandals. Don't wear sandals which are typically women's sandals. Furthermore, Prophet ﷺ said that when you put on your sandals, you should put on your right foot first. And when you take off your sandals, you should take off your left foot first. And if the strap on your sandal breaks, either take off both sandals or fix it, but do not walk with one sandal on and one sandal off. These are the instructions of the Prophet Muhammad. In this regard, that has a legal aspect. He gave instructions. Do this, don't do this, do that. But his choice, as I said initially, in terms of what sandal we wear, that's up to you. Now, some people feel and question, why should it matter which sandal will you put on first? What is this picayune kind of, is Islam that picky that it matters you put on your right sandal first? What if you jumped into your sandals with both feet same time? A question, why is this right left? The point is, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ instructed us to do this to develop in us a sense of awareness of our actions, that we are conscious of what we are doing. Purpose is put into each and every action to separate us from the animals who just do things out of instinct, do things without thought and reflection. So he said, put on your right foot first and take off your left foot first. Also, in putting on your right foot first and taking off your left foot first, we are favoring the right over the left. And in doing so, there is a subtle reminder for us on the day of judgment. We receive our book of good deeds, if we're going to paradise, where? In the right hand. And we receive our book of evil deeds, if we're going to hell, where? In the left hand, behind our backs. Okay, so in favoring the right over the left, there is a subtle reminder for us to choose the right thing so that we will receive our book of deeds in the right hand. It reminds us of Yawm al-Qiyamah. So there is reason behind this. Besides the fact that in doing so, it also trains us in obedience to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's instructions. Now this is a small thing, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, do not scorn any good deed. No matter how small it may seem to you, do not scorn it. What's the big deal? No. Because you are not able to do the big deeds consistently unless you establish the small deeds consistently. If you can't do those small deeds, then for sure you're not going to be able to do the big ones. Or you might do the big ones in a rush one day or 2 days, but you can't keep it going. But when you establish that foundation, that conscious foundation of doing what the Prophet ﷺ showed us to do. So, for example, something which didn't exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, wearing your watch. It has been pointed out that the sunnah of the kuffar is to wear their watch on their left hand. That is the sunnah of the kuffar. The Prophet ﷺ, he favored the right over the left. This is how he's described. Whenever he's doing something which is there's honor in it, he used to put it on the right. He wore his ring on the right. He put on his shoes, right foot first. He put on his clothes, right side first, the right. So in wearing the watch on the right hand, we distinguish ourselves from the kuffar on one hand. Right? This is important. And we follow the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ on the other hand by favoring the right. So, we approach. This is some things people, you never stop to think about this, right? But this is how we should approach all of the things that we do. What was the sunnah? What was the preference of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in these things? And the instructions in that direction. So, we take from that and we apply it. Make it practical in our lives. There's so many statements of the Prophet ﷺ. Grow your beards. Trim your mustaches. Distinguish yourself from the kuffar. This is... So many times you hear the Prophet ﷺ stressing this thing of distinction from the kuffar. So the Muslim identity is clear. What hangs below the ankle is in the hellfire. Pants hanging below the ankle. The way of the kuffar is baggy pants all over your foot. This is their way. And unfortunately, that's what Muslims do today. To wear your pants above the ankle is... people are sheepish about that. This is flood pants. Couldn't afford a new pair of pants. And part of this is all, part of the training that we need to go through. We should never be shy to establish the sunnah. If we feel shyness, sheepish about practicing the sunnah, and we feel comfortable, proud about following the sunnah of the kuffar, we have a problem. We have a problem. This is saying something about our faith. Anyway, as we said, the sunnah is divided into two parts: the natural sunnah and the legal sunnah. And the religion is built from the legal sunnah. Now when we look at a hadith, the hadith has two aspects to it. There's an example of the hadith given in the book. حدثنا مسدد قال حدثنا يحيى عن شعبة عن قتادة عن أنس عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخي ما يحب لنفسه. رواه البخاري. Musaddad told us that Yahya informed him from Shu'bah, from Qatada, from Anas, from the Prophet ﷺ, that he said, none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. Collected by Al-Bukhari. This is the standard format of a hadith. Now the first part of the hadith, where we hear this chain of names, Musaddad told us from Yahya, who informed us from Shu'bah, so and so. This is the chain of narrators, known as the Sanad. And the text which is conveyed, none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself, that is called the Matan, or the text. And the hadiths are traditionally divided into two sections, the Matan and the Sanad. And the Sanad was the natural a natural development from teaching the Sunnah. As the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to each other and to those who came after Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they would always mention the incident and whom they heard that incident from if they didn't see it or hear it themselves. So if they saw it themselves, for example in the case here of Anas in teaching his students from the next generation would have said, I heard Allah's messenger say, none of you believes until so and so. Now Qatada, who was his student from what is known as the Tabi'un, the next generation after the Sahaba, Qatada, when he was teaching his students or other scholars of his generation, he would have said, I heard from Anas, who said that he heard from Rasulullah ﷺ that he said so and so, so and so, so and so. So as the information was being conveyed, those whom that information was conveyed from were mentioned. Right? So this is basically how the chain of narration evolved. And this came about because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was particularly dear to his companions. They honored, revered, loved him, and were very keen to learn whatever he said, to apply it in their lives and to convey it to others. So whenever he told them, none of you has truly believed until I become more dear to him than his son, his father, and all of humankind, when he told them that, they took that statement to heart. They worked on their own faith until the Prophet ﷺ became more beloved to them than their own family. Now, what this meant practically is that they were prepared to do anything he instructed them to do. They were prepared to do anything he instructed them to do. And if their parents or their family asked them to do something which went against what the Prophet ﷺ told them to do, they would refuse. That was the practical manifestation of their love of the Messenger of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ, he told them on one occasion saying, Allah blesses any man who hears a saying of mine, memorizes it and understands it, then conveys it just as he heard it. For perhaps the one who is informed has more understanding than the one who heard it. So he stressed to them the importance of conveying whatever they learned from him. And he used to say, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Convey whatever you have learned from me, even if it is only a single verse of the Quran. So there was great stress placed on conveying the information. But at the same time, he warned them, saying, مَنْ كَذَّبَ عَلَيَّ مُتَعَمِّدًا فَلْيَتَبَوَّعْ مِقْعَدَهُ مِنَ النَّارِ. Whoever lies about me deliberately will find his seat in the hellfire. And this hadith was narrated by the vast majority of his companions. Many companions narrated this. So there was a severe warning. And this is why when you actually look at the numbers of companions who were involved in conveying his sunnah. From the more than 20,000 that were with him on Hajj, right? The 40-odd, 50,000 of them that had made contact with him, those who conveyed hadiths from him were in the neighborhood of 500 plus. 500 plus. Of that 500, 300 of them only narrated one hadith from him. They were careful. They didn't want to convey anything which they had any doubt about. They were careful. To remember one thing, you can do that. Anybody can do that. And they had very good memories. So, the numbers who were actually engaged in conveying the information were few from among the many companions. Now, there is a common misconception that is held, which leads people to doubt the authenticity of the hadiths, because of the fact that historically we know that it was in the reign of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the fifth of the righteous caliphs, he's often referred to, which is like his reign was between 717 and 719, remembering that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ died in 632. Okay, so it's nearly 100 years after the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, less than that, but 80 something years. He instructed the scholars of his time like Abu Bakr ibn Hazm, Sa'ad ibn Ibrahim, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, to collect up the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, to compile them into particular books, and to weed out the narrations which were not authentic. They were given that instruction. So people say that it was some almost 100 years after the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that the hadiths were written down. Actually, this is not correct. In fact, hadiths were written down in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. The majority of the companions who conveyed hadiths did so not only verbally but in writing. And their students, the majority of them recorded the hadiths in writing also. So the writing was going on at the same time as the oral narration. So the sunnah was being transmitted in both the verbal form as well as the written form. When we do future levels of this course, when we go into usul al-hadith in detail, this information inshallah will be conveyed in depth. The research that is involved in there to understand that in fact the sunnah for the most part was recorded from the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and in all of the subsequent generations. So it wasn't that it was being conveyed verbally, orally for nearly 100 years and then all of a sudden they wrote it down, because this is where people who want to raise doubts about the sunnah usually come from. But this is an inaccurate understanding, because the historical record proves otherwise. Anyway, the point is that the hadiths were analyzed and divided into two basic categories. One category which was referred to as sahih, authentic, and another category which was referred to as da'if or inauthentic. These were the main two categories of hadith. And there were conditions which were set, which had to be met for hadiths to be classified as sahih, and when they were not met, they became classified as da'if. And the information which was gathered, which enabled them to make these analyses, was information which was handed down by those who were also handing down the hadiths, that they used to make records of those who attended the circles of hadith, those who taught each other, and the strength of their memories, how effective they were, those who used to write down, those who made mistakes in their narrations. They passed on this information at the same time. This information was compiled, and it ended up also in books, which came to be known as the books of biography, the biographical books, or kutub al-rijal. And from comparing the information of these books, the narrators were categorized as to whether they were reliable or whether they made mistakes on occasion, whether they were liars, and all these kind of things. They analyzed them. And there are three main conditions which need to be met for a hadith to be considered sahih. Now, the actual number of conditions is more than three. I just chose for this introduction to the science three, the main three. And the first condition is referred to as adl, that or adala, that the narrator be truthful, a known practicing Muslim, righteous, honest, God-fearing, pious. This had to be the character of the individual. If it wasn't, they did not narrate from them. Now, if we use that criterion for the information which is conveyed to us in the newspapers and other sources, television, etc., hey, we just have to shut down all the televisions and tear up all the newspapers. We couldn't trust these people. These people in their personal lives are corrupt. They lie without any qualms. If it will make them famous, they'll lie in a minute, right? So that criterion, it just shows you the stringent kind of requirements that they had. That the people had to be known to be righteous, practicing Muslims. And Imam Bukhari, there is an incident from his life which demonstrates how picky he was, where on one occasion he went to gather a hadith, to collect a hadith from somebody some distance away. He had rode for a number, for some days or whatever. He came to the man's house, and the man was outside the house trying to catch his donkey. The donkey had run away, so he was trying to catch it. So what he did was he picked up his stove and he held it like this and was sort of shaking it, implying to the donkey that there's some food in there, so the donkey would come. When the donkey brought his head, he caught him, right? Took him back and tied him up. Imam Bukhari observed this. He had gotten off his horse, he observed it, he got back on his horse and left. He didn't collect the hadith from him, because he felt if he would trick the donkey like this, because it was a trick, and what he did was he tricked him. He faked that there was food there. There's no food there. Okay? He would prefer not to narrate any hadith from this man. This was Bukhari, very picky. And this is why Sahih al-Bukhari, this compilation of hadith, is classified, considered amongst Muslims to be the most authentic book after the Quran. That's how they refer to it. Asahhul kitabi ba'da kitabillah, Sahih al-Bukhari. Well known. Anyway, the first condition we said is that the narrator had to be righteous. The second condition is that he had to have this quality of what is called dabt in Arabic, dabt, which meant accuracy in his narration. Either he narrated accurately from his memory, or he narrated from written texts. So it's either accuracy of narration from memory or accuracy of narration from written text. They call it dabt al-sadr and dabt al-kitaba. Now, how would they know who was accurate in their memory and who wasn't? What would happen is that when a scholar of hadith was teaching, he had a group like yourselves. He would narrate a hadith. He would be teaching a subject and he would narrate the hadiths on that subject, explaining. Prophet ﷺ said this. I mean, after saying, I heard from so-and-so, who heard from so-and-so, who heard from the Prophet ﷺ, who said he said this, that he did this, he approved this, or whatever. Then he would go on teaching through wudu, through tahara, salah, and he would work his way through the various areas of Islamic knowledge. And his students would stay with him. Some would stay, some would go, some would join, some would stay for a while, some would, The main body would stay with him, and they would study under him for years. Not a 3-day course. For years they would sit with him. So it means what happened? The information he was conveying, do you think with those who stayed with him for 10 years, for example, during the period of that 10 years, you think all he conveyed to them was new information? Maybe after a year was over, he ran out of everything he had. He'd given them everything. So what did he do? He started saying it again. So he would repeat that same information every year for 10 years. Now his students are sitting under him. And of course they would go and sit under other scholars too. But they would be with him. Some of them became like his helpers. They would help teach others who came late and these other kind of things. Some of them used to record. That was their responsibility, to help their teacher. They would record all those people who joined the class. How long did they study with him, and all this kind of information. They were recording all this stuff. And at the same time, they're listening to him narrate. If he's narrating from his memory, they would write down what he narrated the first time. Then, when he starts to narrate it the second time, they would put a circle at the end of the hadith, and when they heard him narrate it, they would put a little tick in there. And then the second year they heard it, they'd put another circle, and they'd put a tick. Each time they heard it, they put a circle, put a tick at the end of the hadith. Now, each time he narrates it, they are observing what is in writing and what he's saying. So now if they find the second year that he narrates it, he's narrating it different than the way he narrated it the first time. And the third year he narrated it another way. Right? We have a problem here. This indicated to them that that narrator's memory was not good. If the first year he narrated it one way, second year he narrated it the same way, third year the same way, this is one whose narration, his memory was good. Right? What they would do, if for example they heard him narrate it one way the first year and he narrated it another way the second year, they would go and sit under other students who were from their teacher's level, who narrated it from one from a higher level, and they would see. Because perhaps the double narration was not a mistake of his, but that in fact his teacher narrated it in two ways. So when they check with the other student who was on the same level of their teacher, and they find from him that he also narrated two ways, then they know it is not their teacher. But now the question that needs to be dealt with is, was that a mistake from their teacher's teacher? Or was it in fact how it was narrated in two ways? Now, I'm not saying for you to decide or whatever. I'm just saying that this is the approach that they took, this analytical approach, looking at the material that was being narrated, how it was narrated, etc. And they would use that to determine whether the information which is narrated orally was from people of good memory. They would make notes. My teacher was, sometimes what they used to do, instead of the teacher narrating, the students would narrate, and the teacher would say at the end of the narration, okay. So sometimes what the students would do to check their teachers is they would read back the narration in a different way from how they heard it from the teacher, maybe changing a word or two. And if he said okay, then they knew his memory was not so good. These are among the signs. And this was a test that they did of Imam Bukhari. It's well known in the history of Imam Bukhari that when he came to one of the cities there in Iraq, and the scholars of hadith, he had his fame of being, one of the masters of hadith had spread before him. They welcomed him to the city, and prior to his coming, a group of these scholars of hadith there in the city, they chose 100 hadiths, right? And these hadiths are each one with a chain. And what they did was they switched the chains around amongst themselves. Each one memorized it with the chain of another hadith, right? So when Imam Bukhari came and he sat down, they said, we'd like to get your comment on these particular hadiths. So they narrated to him these 100 hadiths with these reversed chains which have been switched. Imam Bukhari listened to them. When they had finished, he said, this hadith, its chain is so and so, not the chain that you mentioned, and he quoted their chain. Then he went to the next one, he worked his way right through the 100, quoting back to them the wrong chain they mentioned and correcting and putting the right chain in place. The people bore witness that Imam Bukhari was a master. He was the man, as they say, right, in our day, right? He was the man, That was Imam Bukhari. The amount of hadith he memorized was incredible. Allah gave him basically what we call today a photographic memory. He would hear the hadith and it was just there. Anyway, as I said, the people who are narrating hadith, they tested in this way and a variety of different ways those who are narrating, checking their skills, etc. And they made note of all this information. The third major condition is that the one who is narrating a hadith had to have met the one from whom he was narrating. If he narrated hadith from somebody he didn't meet, then that meant that that chain of narration was broken. It was not complete. So this condition really is called continuity of the chain, or ittisal as-sanad. The chain of narration should be continuous, no break in it. How would they know if there's a break? Well, as I told you, people were recording who sat in the circles. So if so-and-so mentioned he heard a hadith, they would go back and check those students who had recorded material of who sat in the circle of this sheikh, and if his name was not on the roster, then they know he didn't meet him. There's a break. Right? Or they recorded information about when they were born and when they died, where they lived. So if, for example, the scholar that he was supposed to be narrating from, he died when that narrator was only 2 years old, hey, he couldn't have heard it from him. He couldn't have heard it from him. Right? And they had a condition that children used to come and listen. So there were children who did hear hadith and did narrate them. Ibn Shihab was among them. He learned from the time he was like 7 years old. They set an age. They said, when a child is able to distinguish between a donkey and a horse, then he can narrate. Right? It means his mind has matured to the point, because for a kid there's a point where the kid, everything is a horse, right? Everything is a horse. When he reaches the point where, yeah, he knows what a donkey is, he knows what a horse is, he has now reached a level of comprehension to say, okay, from that point his narrations will be, and this is around the age of 7, you know, this is also the age Prophet ﷺ had said, you know, a man and woman divorce. When the child is around the age of 7, they have the right to choose which parent they want to go with at the time of divorce, because this is where they have that ability to distinguish. And that's why Prophet ﷺ also said, teach your children salah when they're 7. You see, at 7, and actually even Western educationalists, they do talk about the age of 7 and the age of 10, as the Prophet ﷺ spoke about 1,400 years ago. Anyway, the point is that by comparing this information about the narrators, when they were born, when they died, where they lived, etc., they were able to identify where there were breaks in the chain and where chains were continuous. So when a person finds a hadith which fulfills these criteria, then that hadith is classified as sahih or authentic. And what this means then practically is that we have a piece of information coming from Rasulullah ﷺ which we must accept. We must accept it, because Allah said, "Ma ataakumur rasul fakhudhu." Whatever the messenger has given you, take it. "Wa ma nahakum anhu fantahu." And whatever he has prohibited you, leave it. So you must. If it comes to you, you must take it. This is a requirement. Allah said in the Quran, "May yuti' ar-rasul faqad ata'a Allah." Whoever obeys the messenger has obeyed Allah. So when that information comes in an authentic chain of narration, it is an obligation on us to follow it. And this is what the deen is built on. This is what determines whether we do something or whether we don't do it. If it comes to us in an authentic chain of narration, it becomes a pillar of the religion. If the chain is not authentic, then we cannot build law, we cannot build practice on information which is not authentic. So this analysis of hadith is very, very important in establishing the correct Islamic practices, because it should be noted that the great Imams, Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Al-Shafi'i, Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal, these Imams established their rulings, etc., before the major compilations of hadith. So it means that they did so without having access to this critical analyses which were done after their time. Now there was some analysis being done in their time. I will not say there was not any, and they themselves tried to do what they could, but they were not as specialized as those who came after. As a result, you will find in the different schools practices which are either based on weak hadiths, or they are rulings made without hadith, because no hadith was available. So the scholar would have extracted some principle from the Quran and applied it, when there are in fact hadiths which contradict the conclusion that they've come to. Or the chain of narration may have come to them in a weak channel, but there is also an authentic channel which they were not aware of. So this is the reality. This is why when you go from one school to another, you will find things in them which are not correct. In the Shafi'i school, for example, every Salatul Fajr they make qunut. Now this practice is based on a hadith, but the hadith is weak. The point. In the Hanafi school, it is typical for men to place their hands below their navel in salah. There is a hadith narrated from. The correct position is that the hands are placed on the chest. In the Hanafi school, they say women do this. That's for the women's salah. But the men, they place it below the navel. This is not correct. In the Maliki school, they typically pray with their hands hanging by their sides. But you cannot find any hadith to support it. In the Hanbali school, you can find different rulings like the others, which are based actually on weak hadiths. Every last one of the schools, they said, you will find some practices like that. For example, in the Hanbali school, you find the narration that when you go down into sujood, you place your knees before your hands. This is in the Hanbali school. Also found in the Hanafi. But this is based on a weak hadith. The authentic hadith is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا سَجَدَ أَحَدُكُمْ, if any one of you makes sujood, فَلَا يَبْرُكْ كَمَا يَبْرُكُ الْبَعِيرُ, do not prostrate as the camel prostrates. فَلْيَدَعْ يَدَيْهِ قَبْلَ رُكْبَتَيْهِ, let him put his hands before his knees. That is the correct position. That is the authentic hadith. So I'm just saying that to say that the reason why we find certain differences, and this is not the only reason why there are differences in the schools, we'll look at some of the other differences later, but at least from a hadith point of view, it is possible to correct up some of the differences by identifying the authentic hadiths and leaving these aside. And in fact, all of the great scholars of these schools of Islamic law, they all used to say, Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i and the others all used to say, إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي, if you find the authentic hadith, then that is really my madhab. That was their opinion. They were not about, I'm going to hold on to this thing, do or die, I don't care. No. Because they were of the opinion, unanimously, that if a hadith, an authentic hadith comes to somebody, for somebody to not follow that hadith and go according to the opinion of somebody else, they said this is not permissible in the religion. Not permissible. And there was a classical case of Abdullah ibn Umar, who when he was teaching, he taught people about making Hajj Tamattu'. That's the Hajj in which you combine Umrah along with the Hajj. And whilst he was teaching that, some of the students said, but your father and Abu Bakr said that we shouldn't do Hajj Tamattu', that we should do Hajj Qiran or Hajj Ifrad, that we shouldn't do Hajj Tamattu'. Ibn Omar got mad and he said, I tell you what Rasulullah ﷺ said, and you're telling me what my father and Abu Bakr said? He said, the religion is about to fall on you. And this is what they stressed. What Allah, what Messenger said, this has to be giving precedence over everything else. Opinions can be right or they can be wrong, for a variety of different reasons. The foundation is the authentic narrations. Now, when we look at the books of hadith, there are 6 which are most commonly spoken about. The famous 6, or the sound 6, they are Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Sunan Abi Dawood, Sunan At-Tirmidhi, Sunan Ibn Majah, and Sunan what was the fourth one? An-Nasai, Sunan An-Nasai. Okay, these are the famous 6. Now, actually the number of hadith books are considerably more than the 6, but these are most commonly known by people. Now, the hadiths found in Bukhari and Muslim, these are virtually 100% reliable. That's why they're called Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. But the hadiths found in the Sunan, they vary. Not all of them are authentic. Tirmidhi, Sunan At-Tirmidhi is the most authentic, or has the highest percentage of authentic hadiths of the 4, Sunan At-Tirmidhi and Sunan Abi Dawood. Then Sunan An-Nasai, then Sunan Ibn Majah. In fact, some scholars prefer to put Sunan Ad-Darimi in place of Sunan Ibn Majah. You know? So, those hadiths which are found in the other 4 Sunan and other books similar, they have to be classified before you can use them with surety. The scholar Sheikh Nasiruddin Al-Albani rahimahullah, he did a massive work and analyzing these sunan, these 4 sunan, going through hadith by hadith and identifying the authentic and the inauthentic. So he has a version of the sunan which are called Sahih Sunan Abi Dawood, for example. The authentic narrations of Sunan Abi Dawood and Da'if Sunan Abi Dawood. And he separated them into 2 books. And the weak narrations of Abi Dawood. And he did the same for Ibn Majah, so on, so on, so on. There is a statement made in the book here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4th from the bottom on page 79. Please correct it. There is a mistype. It states there, in the 4th line from the bottom, not the footnotes, 4th line from the bottom, page 79. Page 79. 4th line from the bottom. It starts, nearly all inaccurate. Cross out in. It should be nearly all accurate narrations, which can, it says cannot, cross out the not, which can be used as evidence. Therefore, that sentence should read, from, if you go to the beginning of the sentence, that is, one may freely quote hadiths from both Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim as evidence because they are very nearly all accurate narrations which can be used as evidence. The earliest book of hadiths to reach us is the compilation of Imam Malik, known as Al-Muwatta. This has been translated into English. Al-Muwatta. Now Imam Malik, the Imam of Medina, his grandfather was a Sahabi. His grandfather was a Sahabi. His compilation, as I said, Al-Muwatta, this is the oldest compilation from the period of the Tabi'in to reach us. And the largest compilation of hadiths is that of Imam Ahmed, known as the Musnad of Imam Ahmed, or Musnad Ahmed. That has over 40,000 hadiths. Imam Ahmed collected them all, as many as he could. Not focusing on whether Sahih, Da'if, all this kind, he just focused on trying to collect them all. Imam Malik, he did try to ensure that the hadiths that he collected were authentic. So the number of weak hadiths in Muwatta are few. But his compilation, when you read it, you will see that it contains many statements of the Sahaba. For example, it's not just a hadith collection. It was his teaching notes, you could say. It contains information he got from through the Sahaba, as well as hadiths. And in that Muwatta, you will see him say there that the position of the hands in Salah is right hand over left hand. Though most of Malikis, they pray with their hands by their side. You will hear the term, as I said, hadith sahih, hadith da'if. You can't use the da'if hadith. You will also hear this term hadith mawdu' or fabricated hadith. A fabricated hadith is one which either it has no chain of narration at all, like the hadith, seek knowledge even unto China. Utlubul ilm walau fis sin. This is fabricated. It has no chain of narration at all. Or the hadith, my companions are like stars. Any one of them you follow, you'll be rightly guided. Ashabi kan nujum, bi'ayhim iqtadaytum ihtadaytum. This is not authentic at all. Or it may be classified as fabricated because one of the narrators in the chain was a known liar. He was known to lie. He was caught. People caught him lying. And there's a well-known case of Ibn al-Mubarak, one of the hadith scholars, where on one occasion he went into the masjid in Damascus, and there were people there, storytellers, who used to like to narrate stories. People would gather around them and they would narrate stories. And what they did was they would add chains of narrations to their stories, because the idea of chains of narration was popular, right? So he began to tell this story, right? And he began by saying, Ibn al-Mubarak narrated to me from so and so, so and so and so. So Ibn al-Mubarak came, sat down, listening. Right? So when he finished saying that and he started to tell his story, Ibn al-Mubarak lifted his hand up and started to pluck hairs from under his armpit. The guy stopped his narration and said, "What are you doing? I am narrating a hadith from Rasulullah and here you are plucking hairs from your armpit." Ibn al-Mubarak said to him, "What I am doing is from the Sunnah." Prophet Muhammad said, "You should pluck the hairs from your armpit." What you are doing is lying, because I never narrated any hadith to you. So, such a person, for example, on that kind of occasion, his name, people would make a note of it. This guy was a known liar. So any hadith he narrated, even if other people narrated it authentic, but he said it, liar. That hadith from him would be considered fabricated, not accepted. Once that label went on you, finish. No matter what you narrated, nobody would accept from you again. The use of hadith da'if. Some people have suggested that it is possible to use hadith da'if in areas of what they call Fada'il al-A'mal. That is, Fada'il al-A'mal, how do they translate that now? Virtuous deeds, yeah, thank you. Virtuous deeds, meaning not introducing something which isn't already there, but a hadith which talks about reward for a particular thing which is already there. So like for example, the hadith about Salatul Hajjah. Right? This hadith is da'if. It's found in Fazail al-Amal, which gives you a dua to make. You make 2 rak'ah and you make this dua. They call it Salatul Hajjah. It's in Fazail al-Amal. This hadith is da'if. It introduces something which has no foundation. So you cannot say I can do this because it's from Fazail al-Amal. No, it's not. Because it is introducing something which has no foundation. Right? So that is not acceptable. Whereas a hadith which, though it may be weak, it is talking about something which the Prophet ﷺ already said to do. But it just says, if you do it, you get such and such a reward. So if you did it and there was no such reward, the foundation of what you were doing was already established in the Sunnah. So, no harm. This is what some scholars said. Although the majority of hadith scholars, they rejected this. They said, no, hadith is da'if, don't use it. And it should be noted that those scholars who said, yes, we can use it in these particular circumstances, they only allowed its usage if the reason for the weakness of the hadith was because the memory of the narrator was weak. Not because he was labeled a liar, no. If it was he's labeled a liar, they will not use it at all. So it is only where it was due to some weakness in that narrator's memory. Which means that the likelihood was still there that it could have been authentic. If someone follows some aspects of the Sunnah, he grows his beard, wears his pants above his ankles, yet does not practice important Sunnahs, he disobeys and yells at his parents and has bad akhlaq altogether, is he still considered as someone who is following the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? And if he continuously claims that he follows the Sunnah, is he a liar? Sounds like mom trying to get at son. Anyway, of course, if he is doing these things, he's growing his beard and wearing his pants above his ankles, in obedience to Rasulullah ﷺ, then he is following Sunnah and is rewarded for that. But if he is lying, if he yells, he disobeys his parents, he has bad akhlaq, then he is not following the Sunnah in this respect. And he's earning for himself the displeasure of Allah, some sins against himself. So, because one is doing one thing, and according to the Sunnah, but another thing not according to the Sunnah, this doesn't negate what he is doing. Right? So he can still say, yeah, I'm trying to follow the Sunnah. It's true, it's trying, but in this regard, he's not. And the Prophet ﷺ had said, Al-bir husnul khuluq. Righteousness, true righteousness, is good moral character. That is the essence. True righteousness is good moral character. So obedience to the Sunnah, to the instructions of the Prophet ﷺ, should be comprehensive. It shouldn't be in the part that we like and not in the part that we don't like. We want to yell at our parents, so though Allah tells us that we should be kind to them, lower our voice, be gentle and all these other things, but we don't want to listen to that instruction, so we leave that part of the deen and we focus on another part of the deen. Of course, it's all important anyway, but we should not leave one part and do another part, pick and choose of the religion as which we like. Allah tells us in the Quran, "Udkhulu fi silmi kaffa." Enter into the religion of Islam in its totality. أَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. Do you believe in a part of the book and you disbelieve in another part? No. This is not the way of the true believers. Isn't it time for reputed scholars of all the fiqh schools to come together and remove the practices based on da'if hadiths? Well, some scholars have tried to do that. Fiqh al-Sunnah, for example, by Sayyid Sabiq, he tried to bring all the evidences together and put aside the weak ones, identify them, etc. And scholars have done that. You've had meetings in Mecca and elsewhere where scholars have come together to try to bring the authentic information to bear on contemporary issues, etc. In the classification of hadith, is there a classification called Hasan? Yeah, I didn't go into it because it is something we'd go in on another level. Hasan, really, you can stick it under Sahih, because the early scholars only made two categories, Sahih and Da'if. Later scholars added a subcategory of Sahih, which they called Hasan. What should we do if we are left-handed? Clean yourself when you make wudu with your left hand. You have an advantage over everybody else, right? People think, oh, look at this, it's a right-handed thing. Well, no, not everything, because according to Sunnah, we should clean ourselves with our left hand. Everybody else is struggling with it. You who are left-handed, you got an easy thing, mashallah. But the other things that the Prophet ﷺ said, giving and taking with the right hand, eating with the right hand, we do. Beyond that, if you want to write with your left, no problem. You want to throw a ball with your left, no problem. Islam doesn't insist that you have to do all these other things with your right. No. If you're left-handed, those other things which the Prophet ﷺ did not specify, then you can do it with your left. Not a problem. Does the 40 hadiths of Nawawi collection contain some weak hadiths? Yes, there are a few. There are a few. One of them, which I recall, is the one about none of you has truly believed until his desires become submitted to what I brought. This one's daif. But the sharh or commentary done by Jamal Zarbozo, he's gone through and he has identified the weak ones in there. That is the best compilation of and commentary on the 40 hadith. It is a compilation that any one of you who wants to read hadith, you should get this compilation. And I recommend it for all of you. If you're serious to increase your Islamic knowledge, then get this set it's a 3-volume set by Jamal Zarbozo. Commentary on the 40 hadith of Nawawi. Nawawi, N-A-W-A-W-I. Nawawi. What do you think of the teachings of Imam Ghazali? Did he use a lot of weak hadiths? Yes, he did. And that's why his book, Ihya Ulum ad-Din, one has to be careful of. He has built a lot of rulings on very weak hadiths. Some of them are fabricated hadiths. He has practices in there which are from Sufi practices, which really are unacceptable in Islam altogether. Right? In Tashahud, I notice people making this up and down movement with their index finger. Is this really chasing the shaitan away? Well, Prophet ﷺ did it. Whenever he sat for Tashahud, he set his hand in this form and he moved his index finger, right? Not all over the place, he pointed the finger towards the Kaaba. So the movement, if you're going all the way over here, you're no longer pointing towards Kaaba. If you're going all the way up in the air, you're no longer down to the ground. You're not. So in between here, that way you point, you move, and you're still on the Kaaba. And he said that it is stronger against Satan than iron. And when he did this, he used to look at his finger. So, you know, in the salah, there are different places that you look when you're in standing, when you're yarhamukallah, when you are in ruku', when you're in sujood, when you're sitting, you look at your hand, your right hand, at the finger. And let me just mention that you don't raise it at the time of saying Ashhadu Allah. Okay, this is a common practice that when people are doing, you know, at the time of saying Ashhadu la ilaha illallah, it comes out, and Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, like this. There's this hadith, but it is weak on it. It's not authentic. So you start from the time you sit for tashahud, you point and you move all the way till you make tasleems. Well, it depends on that's your Shafi'i book. The Shafi'i book that the Muslims in Indonesia follow, they don't do that. They just point right from the very beginning, straight away. Someone I know is Shia, and he does many other things, such as removing pure leather during salah, or putting his hands up to his ears in sujood. He also puts a clay block where his head touches the ground, because Prophet ﷺ touched dirt with his head in sujood. Is this appropriate? If not, what can I support it with? Well, we know that the Prophet ﷺ prayed on a prayer mat. He had a mat that he used to put on the ground, and he prayed on it. So we cannot say he always touched his head on the dirt. And that's not why they do it. They do it because that earth, which they call turbat, this little clump of earth, this is taken from Karbala, where Imam Hussein was martyred. He was killed there. And they believe that because his blood was spilt there, that land becomes holy land. Land whose blessings is greater than the blessings of Mecca by some 50,000 times. So yes, they gather up the earth from there, and they make little tablets, little circular or square tablets, and they put it in the oven and they fire it up so it's solid, and they make their sujood on it. And it is not from the Sunnah. A few shuyukh, such as Hafidh ibn Hajar in the past and Sheikh Muqbil among recent scholars, have stated that hadith about moving the finger in tashahud is shadh, related by less trustworthy people than the hadith about not moving it. What is your opinion? Well, as far as I know, that is the stronger opinion. But the hadith also of just pointing without moving at all, that this has strength to it too. So one may just point continually or point and move. Could you please repeat the ruling on Salatul Hajjah? Salatul Hajjah is bid'ah, as it is found in Fazaili Amal. But if one has a need and makes 2 rak'ah and turns to Allah in their own personal dua, that's fine. But the dua which is taught in that narration in Fazaili Amal, it is not authentic. So we don't have a category of what may be called Salatul Hajjah. We have Khutbatul Hajjah, which is the one, Inna alhamdulillah nahmadu wa nasta'inu wa nastaghfiruh. This is called Khutbatul Hajjah. Prophet ﷺ called it that. What do you think about the categorization of hadith by Nasiruddin Albani? I already spoke about that. What is your position on a book by Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanwi called Bahishti Zawar? Should be burned. It contains many rulings and statements which have no support at all in hadith, bid'ah. Lots of stuff. I know it's the most popular book in the Indian subcontinent, but it is an unreliable book. Right? Maybe about 60 or 70% of it is not useful at all. So I would advise you get rid of it and get a book which like Riyadh al-Salihin. This is a reliable book by Imam Nawawi, where he has gathered together good, authentic hadiths covering the same kind of range of topics that you may find in Bahishti Zawar, the heavenly ornaments. If one wanted to get a second wife without having made any contract to keep only one to his first wife, but his wife is threatening to leave him if he gets a second, comment. Well, that's your problem, brother. One has to weigh, the situation. If marrying that second wife is critical, more critical than maintaining your first wife, then you marry the second wife. And if the first wife comes to her senses, then you have two wives. But if the first wife, you've got kids or whatever, and marrying the second wife is going to cause her to go and you have a problem where family splits up and you don't have your children, then it's something one needs to consider, that perhaps for the sake of the children, it's better to hang in there. But the sister, of course, does need to be advised if you as a brother are truly in a position to take a second wife. Because maybe she is leaving because, you don't really have the means, and you're getting a second wife who you're expecting to go out and work, or she's going to collect welfare, or something like this. I mean, if it's not in a proper situation where you are actually the man, the head of the family, providing for your family, so you are capable of providing for a second family, so you're taking a second family who you will provide for without detracting from your provision for your first family, then that's a legitimate circumstance. But sometimes our brothers are a little bit anxious to get number two, and they can't hardly take care of number one. So in such cases, I would not advise them to take second wives. The hadith of wiping the face after dua is da'if. Meaning you make dua when you finish going like this, it's da'if, not authentic. In describing this salah, Prophet ﷺ said, pray as you see me pray. There are narrations where it is stated that whenever you sit for the sitting, the tashahud, in which there is taslim, the end of the prayer, that he used to sit, or he suggested that you sit in the form known as tawarruk, where you put your left foot under the shin of your right foot, and you sit on your left hip. Okay? This is a practice which maybe a lot of people neglect it, and they should be aware of it and try to practice it. My cousin does not like it whenever anyone tells him about Islam and he gets angry. His wife is very open-minded though. However, whenever I try to tell her about Islam, my cousin also gets very angry at me and tells me to stay away from her altogether. We are told in the Quran and the Sunnah to protect our families from the fire. So how can I do this in my situation? Well, I think that you should continue to try to inform your cousin's wife about Islam, as long as she is willing to listen. Try to pass on as much information as you can. Try to avoid the displeasure of your brother, of course, at the same time. But his displeasure should not deter you from conveying the information.